The snow came down heavy enough to bury the fallen on Pale Ridge. They marked her KIA and pulled back without confirming the body. Nobody turned around. Nobody checked for a pulse. She stayed there for 4 hours, blood freezing beneath fresh powder, fingers locked around her father's rifle. When darkness finally settled in, her eyes opened. No crying out, no plea for help, just a whisper, barely loud enough for the wind to carry across the empty field. "I'll make them pay for this." 15 years earlier, the mountains of Montana had looked different, softer, the kind of wilderness where a father could teach his daughter what mattered. 12-year-old Rachel Hartwell knelt beside Lieutenant Commander Jack Hartwell in a blind overlooking a valley where elk moved through morning mist. Her hands were small on the rifle he'd built for her, a Remington 700 in .243, scaled down but real. No toy, no training dummy, the weapon her father trusted her to handle. "Breathe," he said, voice low and steady. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Between heartbeats, that's your window. Rachel's breathing slowed. The elk, a bull at 300 yards, paused to test the wind. Her finger rested on the trigger guard. Not yet. Patience was the lesson today. Patience in reading what others couldn't see. "You see how he's favoring that left foreleg?" Her father pointed without lifting his hand. "Injury, old one, makes him predictable. He'll turn right to compensate. Give it 10 seconds. She waited. 8 seconds. 9. The bull shifted right, broadside, clean shot. Rachel's finger moved to the trigger. Breath held. Heartbeat. Pause. Press. The crack echoed across the valley. The bull dropped, clean. 1 shot, center mass. Dead before it knew the danger existed. Her father smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. "You didn't just shoot what you saw. You read what was coming. That's not marksmanship, Rachel. That's something deeper. That's seeing the world the way it actually works, not the way people tell you it works." They field-dressed the elk together. Blood on her hands, cold air burning her lungs, and her father talking through every step. Not because she needed instruction, because this was how he taught her to think. Break down the problem, solve it methodically, trust your hands and your head, not luck. "Your grandfather survived Grenada in '83 by trusting his gut over orders," Jack said, working his knife through hide. "Some lieutenant told him to advance through an open plaza. Grandfather read the terrain, saw the overlapping fields of fire, refused, saved his entire squad, got court-martialed for insubordination, then decorated for valor when they realized he was right." He looked up at Rachel. "You've got that same gift. You see what others miss. Don't ever let anyone talk you out of trusting it." Rachel nodded, committing it to memory. The weight of legacy already settling on her shoulders. Hartwell blood meant something. 3 generations of warriors who understood that survival required more than following orders. It required reading the battlefield better than the enemy, better than your own command. "The ground never lies," her father continued. "Men do. Officers do. Even good ones make mistakes because they trust briefings over terrain. But the earth? It tells you everything if you know how to listen. Where the enemy will hide, where the water flows, where the wind shifts. All of it written in the landscape for anyone with eyes to see." 3 months later, her father deployed to Afghanistan. Helmand Province, Taliban insurgency at its worst. He sent letters when he could, short ones, always with a lesson buried in the lines. "Terrain analysis saved us today. Command wanted us to patrol through a wadi. I read the high ground, saw the perfect ambush site, pushed for alternate route. They overruled. We went their way, lost 2 good men to an IED exactly where I said it would be. Rachel, when you know you're right, fight for it. Fight until they listen. Those 2 men had families, had futures. Now they're gone because someone wouldn't trust the ground." The final letter came in November 2011. Rachel was still 12, too young to understand the weight of what her father was trying to tell her. but old enough to remember every word. There's an operation tomorrow, Valley Approach. Command insists it's clear. I've studied the satellite imagery, studied the terrain. I see three perfect ambush positions. Classic hammer and anvil. I've briefed it up the chain. They say I'm being paranoid. Maybe I am. But the ground tells me different. If something happens, Rachel, know this. I was right. I'm always right about terrain. Remember that. Trust yourself the way I trust you. The knock came 2 days later. Dress uniforms. Solemn faces. Words that didn't matter because their presence said everything. Lieutenant Commander Jack Hartwell, killed in action. Taliban ambush. Valley Approach. 3 positions. Hammer and anvil. Exactly what he'd predicted. The funeral was full of people who hadn't listened. Officers who'd overruled him. Planners who'd dismissed his analysis. They offered condolences to Rachel and her mother, words hollow and useless. But one man stayed after the others left. Colonel James Brennan, 60 years old then, steel gray hair, eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. He'd been Jack's commanding officer in the field, the man who'd tried to advocate for the alternate route, the man who'd been overruled by higher command. He knelt in front of Rachel, eye level, and didn't insult her with soft words. Your father was right, Brennan said, about the terrain, about the ambush, about everything. I fought for him. I lost. And now he's dead because people wouldn't listen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a P-38 can opener, military issue, old and worn. This belonged to your grandfather, carried it through Grenada. Your father carried it through Iraq and Afghanistan, said it was good luck. I'm giving it to you now because you're going to need it. Rachel took the opener, cold metal against her palm. Why didn't they listen? Because listening would mean admitting they might be wrong. And some people would rather be wrong and certain than right and humble. Brennan's jaw tightened. I failed your father, Rachel. I'll carry that the rest of my life. But I'm going to tell you something he'd want you to know. You've got his gift. The way you see terrain, patterns, things others miss. Don't let anyone take that from you. And when the time comes, when you know you're right and they're wrong, you fight. You fight harder than he did. You make them listen. 15 years passed. Rachel enlisted at 18. Infantry first, because that's where you learn to understand ground combat. Then sniper school at 23. Top of her class in terrain analysis. Second overall in marksmanship. First in fieldcraft and stalking. The instructors noted in her file, exceptional spatial reasoning, sees battlefield geometry instinctively, recommend advanced placement. She carried her father's rifle. He'd built it himself. An M40A5, custom modifications, adjustments that fit his body and shooting style. Rachel had it reworked to fit hers. Same glass, same trigger pull, same weapon that had served him through 2 deployments. Now it served her. By 27, she'd done 3 tours: Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. 16 confirmed kills, 0 misses on deliberate shots. A reputation for reading terrain that made veteran NCOs pause and pay attention. Most of them, anyway. Forward Operating Base Redstone Vale sat in a valley where winter arrived early and refused to leave. November meant snow every other day. Temperatures that hadn't broken 15 degrees in 2 weeks. Visibility that dropped to 50 meters when the wind kicked up, which it did every afternoon like clockwork. Rachel had been tracking weather patterns since arrival. Wind shifted northwest to southwest between 1400 and 1600 hours. Pressure drops warned of storms 3 days out. She logged it all in a waterproof notebook, the same way her father had. The mission brief came down on a Tuesday. Captain Michael Garrett, 45, 20 years in, ran the briefing with the confidence of a man who'd never been seriously wrong. Maps spread across plywood tables, satellite imagery on a laptop screen, intelligence summaries printed on official letterhead. Objective is the ridgeline. Here, Garrett tapped the map. We establish overwatch position before the next weather system rolls in. Intel confirms the area is clear. No enemy presence. No recent activity. Straightforward movement. Establish position. Conduct surveillance operations. Rachel studied the imagery on her own laptop. She'd spent 3 days going over every available satellite pass. There were details Garrett wasn't seeing or wasn't looking for. Boot prints in the snow. Faint but visible if you knew what to look for. Military spacing. 4 to 6 individuals moving in tactical formation. Recent enough to cast shadows in the low-angle light. They'd crossed exactly 300 meters east of the planned route. Drag marks near a tree line. Something heavy positioned, then moved. The kind of marks a PKM machine gun left when fighters shifted it between hides. Disturbed snow patterns on a hillside. Not wind-made. Too uniform. Someone had dug in, covered the position, and tried to erase the evidence. Amateur work. Professional intent. Rachel cross-referenced the patterns with declassified after-action reports she'd studied. Gulf War. Iraqi Republican Guard. 3-point ambush tactics. Hammer and anvil with a blocking position. The exact same setup she was seeing in the satellite imagery. She raised her hand. "Sir, I need to brief a concern about the approach route." Garrett looked up, expression neutral but impatient. "Go ahead, Sergeant Hartwell." Rachel stood, moved to the map, and overlaid her analysis. Satellite imagery shows indicators of recent enemy activity. Boot prints here, consistent with military patrol spacing. Drag marks suggesting heavy weapons positioned in defilade. Disturbed snow on this hillside that reads as a fighting position, hastily concealed. She marked 3 points on the map. If I'm reading this correctly, we're looking at a classic 3-point ambush. They'll hit us here at the draw entrance, here at the midpoint, and here at the exit. Hammer and anvil with a blocking element. Standard doctrine for forces trained in Soviet-era tactics. Silence in the room. Staff Sergeant Evan Sullivan, her usual spotter, leaned forward to study her marks. He'd worked with Rachel long enough to trust her instincts. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, 29 and fresh from staff college, shook his head. Sergeant Hartwell, satellite sweep from this morning shows clear. No thermal signatures, no movement. Intel assessment is negative for enemy presence. Intel is reading the current state, Rachel said, keeping her voice even. I'm reading preparation. These indicators are 12 to 18 hours old. They've already positioned. They're waiting. Garrett studied the imagery, but his expression didn't change. Sergeant, I appreciate thorough analysis, but we have real-time intelligence from multiple sources confirming no enemy activity. What you're seeing could be civilian movement, weather patterns, any number of explanations that don't involve a coordinated ambush. Sir, the pattern is conjecture, Webb cut in. With respect, Sergeant, we can't alter an operation based on hypothetical threat analysis. Rachel's jaw tightened. She pulled out printed images, enhanced details she'd worked on for hours. Sir, these aren't hypotheticals. The spacing, the positioning, the tactical geometry. This is textbook Soviet-style ambush preparation. I've cross-referenced it with historical precedent. Gulf War, 1991. Iraqi Republican Guard used identical. Sergeant Hartwell, Garrett's voice carried command weight now. I've read the same after-action reports. I respect your analysis, but modern intelligence surpasses historical pattern recognition. We have drones, satellites, signals intelligence, all confirming clear conditions. I'm not going to delay or alter an operation based on 30-year-old tactics that may or may not apply. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but a voice from the back of the room stopped her. Captain, might I offer perspective? Colonel James Brennan stood near the door. 70 years old now, retired from active duty, but brought in as a civilian tactical advisor. The Army kept men like Brennan around because institutional knowledge mattered. He'd been at Redstone Vale for 2 weeks, observing operations, offering consultation, and watching Rachel Hartwell with the careful attention of a man carrying old guilt. Garrett nodded. "Colonel, please." Brennan moved to the map, studied Rachel's marks. "I've seen this pattern before. Kuwait, 1991. Republican Guard forces staging ambushes along approach routes. Three-point setup, just like Sergeant Hartwell described. We lost good men walking into those because command trusted overhead imagery over ground truth." He tapped the satellite photo. "These indicators she's identified, they're real. I'd stake my reputation on it." Garrett's expression hardened. "Colonel, with respect, warfare has evolved significantly since the Gulf War. Our intelligence apparatus is exponentially more sophisticated. We have capabilities that didn't exist in 1991. Capabilities that still require human interpretation," Brennan countered. "And humans make mistakes, especially when they're looking at what they expect to see instead of what's actually there. We're looking at real-time intelligence from reliable sources. You're looking at data that confirms your preferred course of action." Brennan's voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. "That's confirmation bias. It's gotten men killed before. It'll get men killed again if you're not careful." The room went quiet. Garrett and Brennan locked eyes. Old tension there, the kind that came from different eras, different experiences, different certainties about how war worked. Finally, Garrett spoke. "Colonel Brennan, I value your experience, but I have a mission to execute, and I'm executing it based on the best available intelligence, which says we're clear." He turned to the room. "We step off at 0500, standard load. Overwatch element will establish on the ridge by 0800. Questions?" None came. The brief ended. Personnel filed out. Rachel stayed, staring at her analysis spread across the table. Everything in her screamed that she was right. The ground was telling her exactly what was coming. But nobody was listening. Sullivan approached quietly. "You seeing something real?" "I'm seeing what my father would have seen," Rachel said. "What got him killed when people wouldn't listen." "Garrett's not a bad officer." "No, he's just a certain one, and certainty makes you deaf." Brennan waited until the room cleared, then moved beside Rachel. He looked at her analysis, at the care she'd put into every notation, every measurement. "Your father would be proud of this work." "My father died doing this work. He died being right when others were wrong. There's honor in that." Brennan reached into his jacket and pulled out the old P-38 can opener, the one he'd given her 15 years ago at her father's funeral. "You still carry this?" Rachel shook her head. "Lost it, moving between deployments." He pressed it into her hand. "Your father gave it to me before his last mission. Said his father carried it through Grenada. Said it was good luck. I'm giving it back to you now because tomorrow you're going to need all the luck you can get." She looked at the worn metal, felt the weight of 3 generations. "You think I'm right?" "I know you're right. I've been reading enemy radio traffic. Degraded signals, but enough to know there's activity in that sector. Chatter about positions, movements, coordination. They're waiting for someone." He met her eyes. "Rachel, I couldn't save your father. I tried. I fought the chain of command. I lost. And I've carried that for 15 years. I'm telling you now, plain as I can say it, if this goes wrong tomorrow, you survive. You use everything your father taught you, everything I taught you, everything 3 generations of Hartwell warriors put in your blood. You survive, and you prove them all wrong. And if I'm wrong, if it really is clear?" Brennan's expression didn't change. "You're not wrong. The ground doesn't lie. Men do. Trust the ground." That night, Rachel sat in her quarters and went through her kit. Weapon clean and function checked. Ammunition sorted and counted. Medical supplies inventoried. Everything a sniper needed to survive in hostile territory. She added the P-38 opener to her survival pouch. Tucked the satellite analysis into a waterproof map case. Wrote a short note on the back. If found, this analysis was correct. They didn't listen. SGTR Hartwell. She thought about her father's last letter, the one where he'd known he was right and command was wrong, the one that ended with him dead in a valley that proved his analysis. History repeating, same pattern, different war, same result waiting. Rachel whispered to the empty room, words her father had taught her. The ground never lies. Then she geared up for a mission she knew would prove it. The column stepped off at 0500 in darkness that felt heavier than it should. 23 soldiers, full combat load, moving tactical through snow that muffled sound in erased tracks behind them. Rachel took her position near the rear. Overwatch belonged in the back, eyes scanning what others missed. Staff Sergeant Sullivan moved beside her, carrying the spotting scope and range cards. "You still seeing ghosts on that ridge?" "I'm seeing what's there. Whether anyone else wants to admit it or not." The movement was quiet, professional. These were good soldiers, well-trained, disciplined. They did everything right, followed doctrine, maintained spacing, checked sectors, all the fundamentals that kept you alive in combat. But fundamentals didn't save you when you walked into a kill zone someone else had built. By 0630, they reached the draw. The approach Rachel had warned about, trees closing in on both sides, high ground overlooking their movement, a natural funnel that compressed the column and limited options. Every tactical instinct Rachel had screamed, wrong. The satellite imagery burned in her memory. 3 positions, hammer and anvil, exactly here. She keyed her radio. "Actual Sierra 2, request hold for assessment." Captain Garrett's voice came back, calm and controlled. "Sierra 2, actual, continue movement. Overwatch reports negative contact." Rachel scanned the left flank through her scope. Snow-covered hillside, trees, shadows. And there, barely visible, a disturbance in the snow pattern, the same one she'd marked on satellite imagery. Someone had been there, recently. The wind hadn't erased it yet. "Actual, Sierra 2, I have possible fighting position, left flank, grid 4, 7-2, 8, 9-1. Recommend we..." "Sierra 2, actual. Overwatch confirms negative thermal signature, no movement. Hold traffic and maintain position." Rachel's finger tightened on her rifle. Every instinct said stop, turn back, alter route. But she wasn't in command. She was a sergeant with a concern that had already been dismissed. Again. Sullivan saw it too. His scope covered the same ground. "That's fresh disturbance." "I know. They're not going to listen." "I know that too." The column pushed deeper into the draw. 200 meters, trees tightening, kill zone compressing. Rachel's heart rate stayed steady, but her mind raced through scenarios. Where the first shots would come from, where the machine gun would be positioned, where the blocking element would cut off retreat. She saw it all before it happened. The terrain told her everything. At 0647, the ambush detonated. Fire erupted from 3 positions simultaneously. Left flank, right flank, rear blocking. Exactly where Rachel had marked them. Exactly the pattern she'd briefed. Exactly what command had dismissed as hypothetical. The front of the column folded under the first burst. 4 men down in the opening seconds. Muzzle flashes from elevated positions. PKM machine gun hammering from the right side. Precision fire from trained shooters who'd rehearsed this. Rachel dropped and rolled behind a fallen log as rounds snapped overhead. Snow detonated where she'd stood. Her radio filled with overlapping voices, casualty reports, bearings, requests for fire support. The chaos of men realizing they'd walked into exactly what one person had tried to warn them about. Garrett's voice cut through, steady despite the circumstances. "All elements, return fire. Suppress left and right flanks. QRF is inbound." Rachel found the flashes through her scope. Left side, elevated position, 2 shooters. Wind from the northwest at 8 miles per hour. Range 400 meters. Angle uphill, approximately 15 degrees. Her mind calculated automatically. Bullet drop, wind drift, elevation compensation. Numbers that lived in her muscle memory. She settled her breathing, found the pause between heartbeats, pressed the trigger. The lead shooter dropped. Center mass, clean. 3 seconds later, his partner tried to shift position. Rachel's second round caught him in the throat. He fell without a sound. Sierra 2, solid work, Garrett transmitted. Keep suppressing left flank. Right side was worse. The PKM gunner had excellent position and training. Long bursts, disciplined fire control, keeping the column pinned. Rachel shifted her aim. Longer range, 520 meters. Tree branches complicating the shot, wind gusting unpredictably through the draw. She waited for the wind to pause, controlled her breathing, found the stillness inside chaos. The gunner shifted to reload. 2-second window. Rachel took it. The round flew true, threading branches in distance. The PKM fell silent. Sullivan slid in beside her, breathing hard, blood streaking his left arm. You hit? Graze, I'm good. He started calling targets. 12 o'clock, 200 meters, behind thick pine. Rachel found him. Her rifle barrel burned despite the cold. Scope work, breathing, trigger press, reload, repeat. 8 confirmed kills in the first 4 minutes. The radio crackled. QRF is 10 minutes out. Air support weathered in. All elements prepare for bound back to rally point. The enemy began pulling back. Not broken, not routed, just withdrawing according to plan. They'd done enough damage, killed enough soldiers, made their point. Now they'd disappear into terrain they controlled. Rachel counted the cost. 3 Americans dead, 7 wounded, all because nobody would listen to the sergeant who could read ground. She thought about her father, dead in a valley he'd predicted would kill him. History repeating in the worst possible way. The column peeled back in tactical bounds, fire and movement, covering each other, professional even in disaster. Rachel maintained overwatch, watching for pursuit. The enemy wasn't following. They'd accomplished their mission. Let the Americans leave. The ambush had worked exactly as designed. Garrett's voice came over the radio. All elements consolidate on my position. Prepare for emergency extract. Rachel shifted to follow, but took a separate line, moving through heavier ground, shadowing the unit instead of joining it. If someone still had eyes out, she wasn't offering a clean shot. That caution kept her alive for another 30 seconds. The round came from a position nobody had cleared, a hide so well concealed that even Rachel's analysis had missed it. The enemy's ace, their counter-sniper, the one shooter they'd held back for exactly this moment. She felt the impact before the sound registered. High chest, right side. The ceramic plate caught most of it, not all. The bullet deflected, angled down, punched through the gap between plate and soft armor. Penetration. Deep. Rachel slammed into the snow. Her rifle spun away. For a heartbeat, there was only white sky and pain. Then her right lung tried to inflate and couldn't. Collapsed. Blood filling spaces air should occupy. The kind of wound that killed you slow if you were lucky, fast if you weren't. She reached for her radio. Right arm wouldn't respond. Nerve damage or shock or both. Left hand dragged the handset close, keyed it, tried to speak. Sierra 2, hit. The words came out wet, bubbling, wrong. She tried again. Sierra, down. Radio traffic drowned her out. The end taking fire. Pilots earning every cent of hazard pay. She heard boots running past her position. Someone moving hard, voices shouting. The chaos of men fighting for their lives and trying to save each other. She tried to call out, managed a wet cough that sprayed red across white snow. More footsteps, then fewer. Everyone moving toward the helicopter, toward safety, away from her. Sullivan's voice cut through the radio chaos. Hardwell! Where's Hardwell? Someone responded. Webb. I saw her with your element. Check your sector. She's not here. Rachel! But the helicopter was spooling up, taking fire, pilots calling for immediate departure. The window for extraction closing fast. Stay too long and everyone died. Leave now and most lived. Command math. Brutal but necessary. Garrett's voice torn but decisive. All personnel mount up, now! We're lifting! Sir, Hartwell is still... Sullivan's protest cut off. Mount up, Sergeant. That's an order. The helicopter's pitch changed. Pulling power. Climbing. Rachel turned her head, using strength she didn't have, and saw it lifting. 100 feet. 200. Rising into gray sky while she bled into foreign snow. She tried to raise her left hand. Useless gesture. Nobody was looking her direction. Through failing consciousness, she heard the final radio transmission. Garrett's voice, controlled but carrying the weight of decisions that would haunt him. All personnel accounted for. Temperature drew out hemostatic gauze. The movement sent lightning through her chest. She nearly blacked out. Held on through force of will. Packed the wound. Pressure. Direct pressure. Stopped the bleeding or nothing else mattered. The pain was transcendent, biblical, the kind that made you want to give up and let darkness take you. She worked through it anyway. Hartwell blood didn't quit. 3 generations of warriors who'd survived impossible situations because they refused to accept death as inevitable. Her father's voice in her memory. Pain is just information. Process it. Use it. Don't surrender to it. Grandfather's voice from stories. Plaza ambush in '83 taught me one thing. When you read danger right, you move, even if it means disobeying orders. Rachel finished packing the wound. Her hands shook, vision blurred, but the bleeding slowed. Not stopped, slowed enough. Next problem, chest seal. She needed to seal the wound or her lung would never reinflate. She had duct tape in her repair kit. Not ideal, not even close to proper medical equipment, but she'd make it work. She stripped tape with her teeth, applied it over the packed wound, creating a one-way valve effect, letting air escape but not enter. Basic field medicine that might buy her hours instead of minutes. The adhesive fought against blood-soaked fabric and freezing skin. She pressed it down anyway, made it stick through will and desperation. When survival time, hours if she stayed here, maybe a day if she found shelter, longer if she could move, hide, and avoid enemy patrols. The enemy would come back. She knew it with the same certainty that had let her predict the ambush. They'd sweep the battlefield, collect intelligence, confirm kills, and if they found her breathing, they'd finish it. She had to move. Rachel rolled onto her side. Agony. She kept rolling. Onto her stomach. Worse. She kept moving, dragging herself through snow toward her rifle. 3 meters felt like 3 miles. Every movement cost blood and consciousness. She paid the price anyway. Her hand closed on familiar polymer and steel. Her father's rifle, built by his hands, carried through his wars, now hers. She pulled it close, checked the action. Snow in the mechanism but not frozen. Still functional. Still deadly. Using the rifle as a crutch, Rachel dragged herself upright. She told it to shut up and keep moving. The snow fell heavier. Good. It would cover her tracks, make her harder to find. The cold was helping too, in its way, slowing her metabolism, reducing blood flow, buying time she shouldn't have. Rachel thought about the helicopter, about that final transmission declaring everyone safe while she lay dying in hostile snow, about Webb dismissing her analysis, about Command ignoring her warnings, about her father dying the exact same way. The rage that settled into her chest wasn't hot. It was cold, methodical, the kind that didn't scream or curse, the kind that made promises in the dark and meant every word. I'll make them pay for this. Not revenge, something colder. She would survive. She would complete the mission they'd failed. She would walk back into Forward Operating Base Redstone Vale, alive while they processed her death notification. And then they would understand exactly what they'd left behind in the snow. A ghost who refused to die. A warrior who'd been right all along. A daughter of legends who would prove that Hartwell blood didn't break. Rachel disappeared into the storm, leaving only footprints the snow would erase. Behind her, the battlefield went quiet. Ahead, 3 kilometers of hostile territory and the shelter that might keep her alive long enough to become the thing the enemy would learn to fear. The ghost of Pale Ridge. The walk had begun. She needed to deal with the wound properly, or none of this mattered. Rachel stripped off her outer layers with hands that shook from cold and shock, peeled back the tactical vest, removed the plate carrier. The armor had saved her life by deflecting the round, but deflection meant angle, and angle meant the bullet had found the gap between protection and punched deep. The chest seal came away sticky with blood, fresh blood. The wound had reopened during the movement. She'd known it would. Couldn't help it. Walking 3 kilometers with a collapsed lung meant choosing between bleeding and dying of exposure. She'd chosen bleeding. The gauze beneath was soaked through, dark red, nearly black. She pulled it free and examined the wound by feel more than sight. Entry high on the right chest. The round had tunneled down and across, missing the heart by inches, clipping the lung, possibly nicking the liver. Hard to tell without proper examination, but the blood told her enough. Internal damage, ongoing bleeding, time measured in days at best. Rachel packed fresh gauze into the wound. The pain made her vision white out. She kept working through it. Pressure, direct pressure, basic field medicine that had kept soldiers alive since men first learned to stab each other with sharp objects. When the wound was packed, she used the last of her duct tape to create a new chest seal. Better this time, more secure. She could feel the difference immediately. 45 rounds of 9 millimeters. Edged weapons, K-bar knife, multi-tool, medical, 1 pressure bandage, handful of band-aids, pain medication already used, no antibiotics. Survival gear, waterproof map case containing satellite analysis, P38 can opener from Brennan, survival mirror, compass, lighter, water purification tablets. Food, 3 protein bars, maybe 1,800 calories total. Water, none. She'd have to melt snow. The math was brutal. Minimal supplies, critical injury, hostile territory, no extraction coming. Command thought she was dead. Even if someone suspected otherwise, they couldn't authorize recovery while the enemy controlled this ground. Standard doctrine said, evade and survive, find a hide, stay low, wait for opportunity, maybe link up with friendly patrols if the front line shifted, maybe last long enough for rescue if someone came looking. Rachel studied her satellite analysis in the dim light, the 3 ambush positions she'd marked, the terrain she'd read correctly while everyone else read it wrong. And there, marked in her notes, additional observations. Enemy movement patterns, likely command structure, probable supply routes. She'd been right about the ambush, which meant she was probably right about everything else she'd analyzed, which meant she knew more about enemy dispositions than they realized, which meant she wasn't just a wounded soldier hiding behind enemy lines. She was a sniper with perfect intelligence and nothing left to lose. The decision crystallized with the clarity that came from having no good options. She could hide and slowly die from infection and starvation. Or she could fight, make them pay for every hour she'd survived, turn their own territory into a hunting ground, become the thing they'd learned to fear in the dark. Her father had died being right. She would live being right, and she'd prove it with precision fire and enemy casualties. Rachel whispered to the empty shelter, voice rough with pain and cold. "You left me. I'll finish what you couldn't." Then she settled in to wait for darkness and plan her first kill. The storm cleared by evening. Temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Clear skies meant better visibility, better shooting conditions, and enemy patrols more confident in their security. Rachel had spent the afternoon in careful observation. The survival mirror let her see without exposing herself. Angled reflection. Old trick her father had taught her. You could watch an entire valley without ever showing your position. She'd identified 4 enemy positions within observation range. 2 kilometers northwest, smoke from a fire. Poor discipline. Probably 4 to 6 fighters staying warm. Due north, approximately 3 kilometers, elevated position on the ridge her unit had tried to reach. 8 to 10 personnel, good tactical placement. That was their overwatch. Southeast, maybe 4 kilometers, another position near what looked like a trail junction, size unknown. And finally, northeast, the command post. She could see antenna arrays, vehicle tracks, the kind of activity that meant leadership and communications. 20 to 30 fighters total in her operational area, maybe more. Professional force, well-equipped, probably Chechen contractors. The tactics matched. The discipline matched. And Chechen fighters had a reputation for exactly this kind of work. Ambush operations, hit and fade, making occupation expensive for conventional forces. They'd done good work today, killed 3 Americans, wounded 7 more, sent a full platoon running for extraction. By their standards, a successful operation. They'd be confident now, relaxed, certain the Americans wouldn't return to this ground anytime soon. That confidence would kill them. Rachel chose her first target carefully. The fire position, northwest. Poor discipline made them vulnerable. But more than that, killing them would send a message. Someone was still out here, still operational, still dangerous. She waited until 0300 hours, the dead of night when human alertness dropped to its lowest, when guards got sloppy, when the cold made men huddle close to fires and think about anywhere but here. The movement to shooting position took an hour, 200 meters of careful stalking through snow and darkness. Every step calculated, every sound controlled. Her body screamed at her. The fever had climbed to 101. The wound throbbed with each heartbeat. She ignored it all. Pain was just information. Heartwell blood didn't quit. She found her position on a small rise. Prone. Rifle bipod deployed. Scope covers removed. Range to target, 580 meters. Wind negligible. Temperature correction for cold air density. Elevation minimal. Through her scope, the enemy position resolved into detail. 4 men around a fire, talking, smoking. 1 standing guard, but facing the wrong direction. Looking toward where the Americans had retreated, not expecting threat from behind their own lines. Rachel's breathing slowed. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out. Her heart rate dropped. The fever tried to make her hands shake. She locked her elbows and steadied the rifle through pure will. The standing guard was first. Sentry removal. Standard counter-sniper work. She found him in the scope. Center mass, adjusted for wind. Found the pause between heartbeats. Pressed the trigger. The suppressed shot was still loud in the night silence, but 500 meters away, it arrived as a whisper before death. The guard dropped without a sound. His companions didn't react immediately. They thought he'd sat down, fallen asleep. Something normal. Rachel had already shifted aim. Second target, the fighter closest to the radio. Communications kill. She fired. He fell forward into the fire. That got their attention. The remaining two scattered. Training kicked in. Find cover. Return fire. But they didn't know where the threat was. Couldn't see muzzle flash from a suppressed weapon at this range. Started shooting at shadows. Rachel's third round caught one as he dove behind a log. The angle was wrong. She'd aimed for center mass, got shoulder instead. He went down screaming. The fourth fighter made the smart play. Ran. Full sprint away from the position, heading for the nearest friendly element to raise alarm. Rachel tracked him. Running target. 600 meters and increasing. Wind picking up. Difficult shot. She led him by 3 body lengths. Adjusted for his speed. Squeezed. The round caught him mid-stride. He tumbled into snow and didn't move. 4 enemies, 4 shots, 3 kills, 1 wounded. The wounded one was still screaming. Good. Let him scream. Let the others hear it. Let them understand that someone was hunting them in the dark. Rachel displaced immediately, 200 meters to a secondary position she'd identified during approach. Never stay in the same spot after contact. First rule of sniper fieldcraft. She moved through the pain and fever, reached the new hide, went prone again, watched. The enemy response took 12 minutes. Careful approach from the north position. 8 fighters moving tactically. Lights sweeping the area where she'd fired from. Finding nothing, she'd left no trace. They found their dead, found the wounded man. Radio traffic spiked. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Confusion, fear. They'd been hit from inside their own perimeter. No muzzle flash, no sound, just death arriving from darkness. One of them pointed in the wrong direction. They started searching south, away from her actual position. Rachel smiled despite the pain. They were already making mistakes. She let them search. Let them waste time and energy. When they finally consolidated back at the fire position, she was already moving again. Returning to the shepherd's shelter. First mission complete. The sun rose on a changed battlefield. Rachel monitored enemy radio traffic from her hide. She'd found a hand-crank radio in the shelter, old Soviet-era equipment, but it picked up their frequencies. The chatter was frantic, reports flowing to command. 4 casualties, unknown attacker, no confirmation of American presence. Theories ranging from infiltration team to surviving straggler from yesterday's ambush. That last one made her smile. Straggler. They had no idea. By 0800, she'd identified the response pattern. They were pulling in patrols, consolidating forces, setting up defensive perimeters. Exactly what frightened commanders did when they didn't understand the threat. Good. Fear made them predictable. Rachel spent the day in careful observation and planning. The fever climbed to 102. She forced down a protein bar and melted snow for water. Her body was eating itself, burning through reserves to fight infection and maintain core temperature. She was losing weight she couldn't afford to lose, strength she desperately needed. But she was also gathering intelligence, mapping positions, identifying leaders, understanding their pattern of life. Every hour of observation was an hour of preparation for the next strike. The elevated position north drew her attention. 8 to 10 fighters, good discipline, professional setup, overlapping fields of fire. That was their primary overwatch. Take it out and the enemy would be blind. But it was also the hardest target. Well defended, alert. They'd learned from last night that someone dangerous was operating. Rachel decided to hit somewhere else first, keep them off balance, make them chase ghosts while she systematically dismantled their network. At 1600 hours, she moved on the southeast position, Trail Junction. She'd observed 6 fighters there during the day, controlling movement, probably running supplies or coordinating patrols. The approach took 2 hours through broken terrain. Her body was failing. The wound had started bleeding again, fresh blood on the dressing. The fever made distances hard to judge, made the scope image swim and blur. She compensated through training and stubbornness. Position acquired at 1800, just before full dark. Range, 640 meters. Elevated shot. Wind variable. This would be technical shooting. She identified the priority target through observation. One fighter who carried himself differently, authority in his posture. Others deferred to him. Squad leader or equivalent. Kill him first. Decapitation. The shot was difficult, wind gusting through the valley, her fever making her hands shake despite all control. She waited for conditions to align. Patience over speed. Her father's voice in memory. A sniper doesn't take the shot that's available. She waits for the shot that's perfect. 20 minutes of waiting. Then the wind paused. The leader stepped into clear space. Rachel's scope settled, breathing controlled. Fever pushed aside through will. Trigger press. The round flew true. The leader dropped. Instant chaos in the position. Men diving for cover. Weapons up, searching for threat they couldn't see. Rachel shifted to a secondary target. Fighter with radio. Cut their communications. Second shot. Clean hit. The radio operator fell. Return fire started. Blind shooting. They still couldn't locate her. Rounds snapping through trees 300 meters from her actual position. She waited for them to empty magazines. Let panic burn through their ammunition. When the firing paused, she took her third shot. Another fighter, then her fourth. Methodical. Mechanical. Each round a statement. You're not safe. Nowhere is safe. I'm already inside your perimeter, and you can't stop me. 5 targets down before she displaced. Moving through terrain she'd memorized during approach. Escape route planned before first shot. Professional work. The kind her father would recognize. The kind Brennan had taught soldiers for 40 years. Behind her, the enemy position dissolved into chaos. She could hear shouting, vehicles starting, the sound of men who just learned they were being hunted by someone who understood this ground better than they did. Back at the shelter, Rachel allowed herself to collapse. The movement had cost her. Blood loss, energy expenditure, fever climbing toward dangerous levels. 103 degrees. Maybe higher, hard to tell without a thermometer. She packed the wound again, changed the chest seal, forced down another protein bar despite nausea, melted snow and drank until her stomach cramped. Basic field medicine, basic survival. Staying alive through small actions, repeated constantly. The radio crackled with enemy traffic, more frantic now. Commanders demanding answers, patrols reporting negative contact, fear bleeding through professional military language. Rachel caught fragments. Her Russian was basic, learned from language tapes and deployment exposure. But she understood enough. Sniper, ghost, inside our lines. Multiple positions. How many enemy traffic about a sniper? Multiple kills. Strikes from unexpected positions. Fighters scared of a ghost who appeared from nowhere and disappeared like smoke. Brennan pulled up the map, marked the reported contact locations. A pattern emerged. Systematic, intelligent. Someone who understood terrain and tactics. Someone trained in counter-sniper operations. Staff Sergeant Sullivan appeared in the doorway. "Colonel, you wanted to see me?" Brennan gestured to the map. Enemies reporting sniper activity. Here, here, and here. 9 confirmed kills in 18 hours. Professional work, textbook stalking, and displacement. Sullivan studied the locations. His expression changed. That's all within 5 clicks of where we lost Rachel. Lost is the wrong word. Where we left her. Brennan met his eyes. I've been monitoring enemy frequencies since yesterday. This started 12 hours after our extraction. Someone's behind their lines. Someone who knows what they're doing. You think it's her. I know it's her. These aren't random strikes. Look at the target selection. Fire position with poor discipline. Communications node. Leadership element. She's not just surviving. She's conducting a systematic campaign to disrupt their operations. Sullivan's face went through several emotions. Hope, guilt, determination. We have to go get her. Garrett won't authorize recovery. Enemy still controls that ground. He's already written the casualty notification letter. Far as official records show, Sergeant Rachel Hartwell died in action yesterday morning. Then we go unofficial. Brennan shook his head. Not yet. She's doing something out there, something important. And she's doing it alone because we left her no choice. We go crashing in now, we might get her killed. So we just leave her? Again? No. We prepare. We gather intelligence. We track her progress. And when the moment's right, when she's ready for extraction, we go get her. But on her terms, not ours. Brennan tapped the map. Right now, Rachel Hartwell is running the most effective solo sniper operation I've seen in 40 years. She's turned their own ground into a killing field, and they're terrified. Let her work. Sullivan stared at the map, at the marks showing where Rachel had struck, where she was proving she'd been right all along. She's going to make them pay. She already is. Day 3 brought new complications. The enemy adapted. Patrols moved only in daylight, in groups of 10 or more, with overwatch elements covering their movement. Radio discipline improved. Fires were banned. Defensive positions reinforced. They were learning, getting smarter, making Rachel's job harder. Good. She wanted it hard. Wanted them to understand that adaptation wouldn't save them, that she'd adjust faster than they could, that this more professional, someone new had arrived. Through her scope at maximum magnification, she caught glimpses of a figure different from the others. Older, gray beard, moving with the economy of a man who'd spent decades in the profession. He set up a counter-sniper position with textbook precision, overlapping sight lines, multiple firing positions, escape routes planned. Rachel recognized the setup. This wasn't a conscript or contractor doing a job. This was a hunter who understood the game she was playing. Commander Dmitry Volkov had arrived, Chechen legend, Soviet-Afghan war veteran, 15 years of counter-sniper operations. The enemy had brought in their ace to kill the ghost. For 18 hours, they played chess across snow and rock. Rachel would identify a position. Volkov would anticipate it and set observation there. Rachel would shift. Volkov would adjust. Neither took a shot they weren't certain of. Neither made the amateur mistake of revealing position for a low-probability kill. The fever made it harder. 103 degrees, vision blurring at edges. But Rachel's training held. She remembered Brennan's Gulf War stories about sniper duels. Patience kills impatience. The one who waits longest wins. Volkov was patient, but Rachel was dying, which meant she had less to lose. She set the trap on day 4, 0600 hours. Using Brennan's survival mirror, she created a false reflection from a position 300 meters from her actual hide. Morning sun, perfect angle, the kind of rookie mistake a fever-addled sniper might make. Volkov studied it for 20 minutes. Rachel watched him through her scope, saw him calculate angles, consider possibilities. His discipline was extraordinary. He didn't take the bait immediately, but eventually biology won over caution. He shifted slightly to get better angle on the false position. Just 15 centimeters, enough to expose his shoulder. Rachel's shot was 640 meters through morning thermals and gusty wind. She'd calculated every variable, adjusted for his movement, led the target by 8 inches, compensated for the slight elevation difference and the way cold air would affect bullet trajectory. The round took him high shoulder, not immediately fatal. But Volkov understood what it meant. He'd been beaten by someone better, someone who'd read his pattern and exploited the only weakness he'd shown. His final radio transmission came through on the frequency Rachel monitored. Russian, weak voice. Dostoyny protivnik, worthy opponent. Then silence. Rachel reached his position 30 minutes later, moving through pain that made each step an exercise in will. Found his observation log. Notes about female sniper, exceptional fieldcraft, systematic target selection. A photograph fell from his notebook. Wife. 2 daughters, somewhere in Chechnya waiting for a man who wouldn't come home. She closed his eyes, took his rangefinder and radio, better optics than hers, intelligence she could use, left the photograph on his chest. "You were good," she whispered. "I was better. Nothing personal. The enemy's best hunter was dead. Their morale would shatter when they learned, and their command post was next." The command post, northeast, 4 kilometers, heavily defended now. Additional security since her strikes began, but also the nerve center, kill it, and their coordination collapsed. Rachel spent all of day 4 observing from multiple positions. The fever had stabilized at 103, not dropping, not climbing. Her body locked in a battle between infection and immune system. She was losing weight rapidly, muscle mass burning for energy, strength fading. But her mind stayed sharp, focused. The training held when flesh failed. She identified guard rotations, shift changes, patterns in their security, found the weaknesses. Every defensive position had them. Human beings got tired, got sloppy, got predictable. The command post had one critical vulnerability. During shift change at 0400 hours, there was a 3-minute gap. New guards walking to posts, old guards walking away. A window where attention shifted from watching outward to coordinating handoff. 3 minutes. She could do a lot of damage in 3 minutes. Day 5, 0300 hours. Rachel began her final approach to the command post. 2 kilometers through terrain she'd never scouted, moving blind, trusting map memory and tactical instinct. Her body was nearly done. The fever had spiked to 104. Hallucinations flickered at the edge of vision. Her father walking beside her. Grandfather's voice offering advice. Brennan telling her to hold on. She knew they weren't real. Fever dreams. Neural misfires from a brain running too hot. But their presence helped. Made the movement bearable. Gave her something to hold on to when every step felt like the last one she had in her. 90 minutes later, she reached the final approach. 300 meters from the command post. Close enough to observe. Close enough to count sentries. Close enough to die if they spotted her. The position was better defended than she'd hoped. 12 guards visible, probably more inside. Sandbagged fighting positions. Machine gun placements. Professional military installation. Standard doctrine said don't attack hardened positions without support, without numbers, without overwhelming advantage. Rachel had none of those things. What she had was perfect intelligence, desperation, and the last full magazine in her rifle. 24 rounds, plus the 4 in her current mag. 28 total. She'd make them count. At 0355, she settled into final firing position. Elevated slightly, good sight lines to command bunker entrance. Range, 300 meters. Wind, calm. Temperature effects already calculated. The fever made the scope image shimmer. She blinked it away, focused. This was the shot that mattered. Everything had been building to this. At 0400 exactly, the shift change began. Old guards standing, new guards arriving. That critical gap in attention. Rachel fired. The first round took the commander as he stepped from the bunker. She'd identified him earlier through binoculars. The way others deferred. The radio calls directed to him. Kill the head and the body dies. He dropped. Instant alarm. But alarm took seconds to process into action. Seconds she used. Second shot. Communications officer visible through bunker doorway. He fell backward into equipment. Third shot. Guard at machine gun position. Fourth shot. Second guard running for the gun. Now they understood. Return fire started. Heavy volume. But they didn't know where she was. Firing at muzzle flash that didn't exist with her suppressed weapon. Wasting ammunition on shadows. Rachel kept working. Methodical. Calm. Each target selected for maximum disruption. Radio operators, officers, anyone who looked like they made decisions. The magazine emptied. She dropped it. Loaded her last full mag. 24 rounds, 24 targets. commanders, radio techs, security chiefs, vehicle drivers, anyone whose death would create chaos and confusion. She didn't rush, didn't panic, just breathed and fired, breathed and fired, the way her father had taught her, the way 3 generations of warriors had proven worked. The magazine ran dry. 24 shots, 22 confirmed hits, 2 misses where targets moved unpredictably. Better than 90% accuracy under combat conditions, while running a 104-degree fever. Rachel didn't stay to admire her work, dropped the empty magazine, drew her sidearm, began the movement away from chaos she'd created. Behind her, the command post dissolved. No leadership, no communications, no coordination, just confused fighters shooting at nothing while their command structure bled out in the snow. She made it 200 meters before her legs quit, just stopped working. Muscle failure, blood loss, fever, exhaustion, all of it catching up at once. She went down hard. Voices shouted behind her, flashlights sweeping. They'd found her trail, blood in the snow, boot prints, the path she'd taken. Rachel dragged herself behind a fallen tree. Not much cover, but better than nothing. She had her sidearm, 45 rounds of 9mm, enough to make them pay for finding her. The voices got closer. 3 fighters, moving carefully. They'd seen what she could do, weren't taking chances. She waited until they were 20 meters away, then fired. 3 rounds, center mass on the lead fighter. He dropped. The others scattered. Return fire shredded the tree, splinters and bark flying. Rachel shifted position. Fired again. Another hit. Second fighter down. The third one ran. Smart. He'd seen 2 men die in 5 seconds. Decided survival beat heroism. Rachel lay behind the log and tried to make her body move. It wouldn't. She'd burned through everything. No reserves left, no strength, no options. The fever peaked. 105, maybe higher. Consciousness started to slip. She fought it, held on, but biology had limits even Hartwell's stubbornness couldn't overcome. Her last coherent thought was wondering if she'd done enough, if the damage she'd caused would matter, if anyone would know she'd been right. Then darkness took her, and the world disappeared into fever dreams and blood loss and the cold that was finally winning. When her eyes opened again, it was daylight. She was still behind the log, still alive. Somehow. The fever had broken during the night, down to maybe 102. Still dangerous but survivable. Enemy voices in the distance, searchers, looking for the ghost who'd killed their commanders and vanished into snow. They sounded scared. Good. Rachel checked her supplies. Sidearm, 2 magazines left. No rifle. She'd left it at the shooting position. No food. No water except snow. No medical supplies. But she was alive, and she'd accomplished something the enemy would remember. Something that would change how this battle was fought. The radio on the dead fighter near her crackled. Russian. Fragments she could understand. Command post destroyed. All officers killed. Communications equipment destroyed. Request immediate support. Negative. All units pulling back. Sector is compromised. Ghost sniper effectiveness too high. They were retreating, pulling out of the area, abandoning ground they'd held because one wounded soldier had made it too expensive to stay. Rachel smiled through cracked lips. She'd done it. Turned their victory into defeat. Made them afraid of shadows and snow. Proven that leaving her had been the worst mistake they could make. Now she just had to survive long enough to walk home and show them what victory actually looked like. She started crawling south, toward friendly lines, toward vindication, toward the moment when everyone would understand she'd been right all along. The ghost wasn't done walking yet. Day 6 began with Rachel Hartwell understanding she was dying. Not the quick death of a bullet, not the sudden ending of catastrophic blood loss. The slow, grinding death of infection, winning against a body with nothing left to fight back. The fever had climbed again overnight. 105 degrees, maybe higher. Her vision blurred and doubled. Hallucinations came in waves. The wound had gone from red to angry purple, sepsis spreading through her bloodstream like poison. She'd made it 3 kilometers south during the night, crawling most of the way. Using trees to pull herself upright when crawling wasn't enough, leaving a trail of blood drops in snow that would have made tracking her trivial if anyone still cared enough to follow. But the enemy had pulled back. She'd heard it on the radio she'd taken from the dead fighter. Entire sector evacuation. Command structure destroyed. Ghost sniper deemed too high risk. They were retreating to regroup somewhere she couldn't reach them. Somewhere safe from the wounded American who'd turned their victory into nightmare. Rachel had won. Tactically. Strategically. She'd proven every analysis she'd made. Vindicated every warning they'd ignored. Accomplished what an entire platoon couldn't. And she was going to die before anyone knew it mattered. The morning sun felt wrong on her face. Too warm. Fever distorting her perception of temperature. She knew it was still below freezing, could see her breath fog the air, but her skin burned like summer desert. She'd abandoned the sidearm 2 kilometers back. Too heavy. Ammunition didn't matter if she couldn't hold the weapon steady. Now she had only the knife, the multi-tool, the survival mirror, the P-38 opener that had belonged to 3 generations of warriors who'd all managed to come home. She wouldn't. The math was simple. 5 kilometers still separated her from the nearest American patrol route. In her current condition, that might as well be 500. Each meter cost more than the last. Each movement burned energy she didn't have. Her body was cannibalizing itself. Muscle, fat, anything it could convert to fuel for one more step. At 0800 hours, she collapsed against a tree and couldn't get back up. Legs wouldn't respond. Arms shook too hard to bear weight. This was it, the place where the story ended, where the sergeant who'd been right got to be right and dead simultaneously. Rachel pulled out the waterproof map case. Inside, the satellite analysis she'd done. The predictions that had been perfect. The warnings nobody heeded. She'd added notes during her days behind enemy lines. Enemy positions, kill counts, tactical observations. Intelligence that could save American lives if it ever reached friendly hands. She wrote a final note on the back, hands shaking so badly the letters barely qualified as legible. 17 enemy KIA, command post destroyed, offensive prevented. Satellite analysis was correct. They didn't listen. I proved it anyway. Sergeant Rachel Hartwell. Tell Colonel Brennan I finished it. Tell my father I was right. She sealed the case, set it beside her in the snow where searchers might find it. If searchers ever came. If anyone cared enough to look for remains. If the story didn't just end here with snow covering evidence and winter erasing proof. The hallucinations intensified. Her father materialized beside her, solid as life, dressed in the uniform he died in. You did good, baby girl, he said, voice exactly as she remembered. Better than good. You proved what needed proving. Didn't matter, Rachel whispered, still dying. Death doesn't erase truth. You were right. That stands forever. Her grandfather appeared on the other side, the man she'd never met, killed in a training accident before she was born. But she knew his face from photographs, knew his story from family legend. Granada taught me that living is about being too stubborn to quit, he said. You've got Hartwell blood. We don't quit at the finish line. Can't get up, she said. Body won't move. Then rest. 5 minutes, then try again. Rachel closed her eyes. Just 5 minutes, then she'd try. Then she'd keep moving. Then she'd... Gunfire snapped her awake. Close, maybe 200 meters north. Automatic weapons, American caliber. The distinct crack of M4 carbines. She tried to move, couldn't, tried to shout, managed a wet cough that sprayed blood across snow. The shooting stopped. Voices, getting closer. English or Russian? She couldn't tell through the fever fog. Couldn't risk revealing her position to enemy forces that might still be searching. Boots crunching through snow, multiple people, moving tactically, checking sectors. A voice called out, American accent, Southern. "We've got blood trail here, fresh, last few hours." Another voice, familiar. Rachel's fever-scrambled brain tried to place it. Follow it. Weapons tight. Could be wounded enemy. Staff Sergeant Evan Sullivan, her spotter, her teammate, the man who'd screamed her name when the helicopter lifted without her. Rachel tried to call out. Her voice came as barely a whisper. "Evan." The footsteps got closer. She heard the sound of a rifle bolt checking chamber. Professional movements. Careful. They'd been burned before by assuming wounded meant helpless. Then Sullivan came around the tree and stopped dead. "Medic!" The word tore out of him. "Medic, now! Rachel! Rachel!" Hands on her face, checking pulse, assessing wounds, professional even through emotion. She tried to focus on his face but couldn't hold the image steady. "Evan," she managed. "Intelligence. Map case. Important." "Shut up, don't talk. Save your strength." He keyed his radio. "Actual, Rescue 2. We've got her. Hartwell is alive. Critical condition. Need immediate medevac." More soldiers arrived. A medic dropped beside her. Young kid, maybe 23, looked terrified at what he was seeing. "Jesus Christ," the medic breathed. "Collapsed lung, sepsis, severe dehydration. Temperature has to be 105 plus. How is she still alive?" "Because she's a Hartwell," Sullivan said, "and Hartwells don't quit. Get an IV started, antibiotics, whatever you've got." The medic worked fast. IV line in her left arm, fluids running, antibiotics pushed, pressure dressing on the reopened wound. Professional trauma medicine performed in field conditions. Rachel felt the drugs hit her system, warmth spreading from the injection site. Not fever warmth, medical warmth. Help arriving after 6 days of fighting alone. "The map case," she said again, insistent. "Intelligence, enemy positions, attack plan, stop offensive." Sullivan found the case, opened it. His expression changed as he read her notes. "Colonel Brennan needs to see this," he said quietly. "Right now." The radio crackled. Different voice. Command frequency. "Rescue 2, actual. Medevac is inbound. ETA 8 minutes. What's Hartwell's status?" Sullivan looked at the medic. The medic shook his head slightly. "Touch and go. Could lose her any second." "Status is alive, sir," Sullivan transmitted. "Against all odds. Against everything we thought possible. She's alive." Rachel grabbed Sullivan's sleeve. Weak grip. Barely there, but insistent. "Did I?" She coughed, blood on her lips. "Did I prove them wrong?" Sullivan's eyes were wet. "Yeah, Rachel, you proved everyone wrong. You proved you were right, and you saved about 300 American lives doing it." She smiled, faint. "Good. Tell Brennan. Tell him I finished what Dad started. You can tell him yourself. You're going home." The helicopter arrived like thunder from heaven. Blades beating air. Downdraft throwing snow in blinding clouds. The birds settled into a clearing 30 meters away. Door gunners scanning for threats. Pilots holding position despite hostile territory. They loaded Rachel on a stretcher, strapped her down. Sullivan ran alongside as they moved her to the aircraft. She tried to stay conscious, tried to see the faces of the men who'd come back for her, tried to remember this moment when everything changed from dying alone to being carried home by brothers who hadn't forgotten. But the drugs and exhaustion and relief all hit simultaneously. Darkness pulled her down. This time she didn't fight it. This time she knew she'd wake up somewhere safe. The last thing she heard was Sullivan's voice. "You did it, Rachel. You actually did it." Then nothing. Forward Operating Base Redstone Vale received the medevac alert at 0947 hours. Colonel James Brennan was in the command center when the call came through. He'd been there for 6 days, sleeping in a chair when he slept at all, monitoring every radio frequency, tracking every report of sniper activity, waiting for proof that Rachel Hartwell was still alive. When the report came through that Rescue 2 had found her, Brennan's hands shook. First time in 40 years of service. Just trembling. Relief and guilt and pride, all mixing into something that made a 70-year-old combat veteran blink back tears. Captain Michael Garrett entered the center looking like he'd aged a decade. 6 days of living with the decision to leave a soldier behind. 6 days of writing casualty letters he hadn't sent yet because something told him to wait. 6 days of wondering if he'd killed Rachel Hartwell through certainty and dismissal. "Colonel," Garrett said quietly, "they found her." "I heard. Sullivan says she had intelligence, documentation, something about preventing an enemy offensive." Brennan pulled up the enemy radio intercepts he'd been tracking, the pattern of withdrawal, the panic in their communications, the references to destroyed command structure and ghost sniper. "She did more than survive, Captain. She conducted a solo campaign that dismantled their entire operational network. 17 confirmed kills. Command posts destroyed. Their leadership scattered. Intelligence she gathered prevented a coordinated assault on 3 FOBs, including this one." Brennan looked at Garrett. "1 wounded soldier, 6 days. She accomplished what a full company couldn't." Garrett sat heavily. "She was right. About everything. The ambush, the tactics, the terrain. And I dismissed her." "Yes, you did." "I left her to die." "Yes, you did." Garrett's face worked through emotions. "How do I live with that?" Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke with the weight of 40 years carrying similar guilt. "You live with it by making sure it never happens again. You live with it by changing how this army evaluates intelligence from personnel in the field. You live with it by ensuring that the next time someone sees what Rachel saw, command listens. You live with it by honoring what she accomplished instead of burying it." He met Garrett's eyes. "And you live with it by making sure she knows her sacrifice mattered, that what she proved changed things. That's how you carry it." The helicopter carrying Rachel landed at 10:23 hours. Brennan and Garrett both watched it come in. Door gunners still mounted, pilots still scanning, birds still hot from enemy territory. The medical team pulled Rachel's stretcher out. She looked dead. Skin gray, lips blue, body so thin the bones showed through, IV bags hanging, monitors beeping urgent warnings about blood pressure and heart rate and temperature. But her eyes opened as they moved her past Brennan. Just for a second, recognition flickered there. "Colonel," she whispered, voice like broken glass. Brennan walked alongside the stretcher. "Sergeant Hartwell, welcome home." "I was right." "Yes, you were. About everything. They left me." "They did, and they'll have to live with that. But you survived. You proved what needed proving. And you saved hundreds of lives doing it." He squeezed her hand. "Your father would be proud beyond words." "Hell, I'm proud. You surpassed both of us." Rachel said her survival was medically improbable. They didn't understand Hartwell blood, didn't understand 3 generations of warriors who'd survived impossible situations through pure, stubborn refusal to quit. Rachel woke 4 days later in a hospital bed in Germany. Medical evacuation had moved her from field hospital to major trauma center. She had tubes and wires and monitors connected to places she didn't want to think about. But she was breathing on her own, thinking clearly, alive. Brennan was sitting beside the bed, reading a book, waiting. "Colonel," Rachel said, voice still rough but stronger. He looked up, smiled. "Welcome back, Sergeant. You gave us quite a scare." "How long?" 10 days since we pulled you out. You've been unconscious for most of it. Touch and go for a while. But the infection's cleared, lungs reinflating. Doctors say you'll make full recovery." Rachel processed that. 10 days. She'd survived 6 days behind enemy lines, then nearly died in friendly care. The irony wasn't lost. The intelligence, she said, did it matter? Brennan pulled out a folder. Official documentation, after-action reports, signal intercepts, battle damage assessment. Your documentation prevented an enemy offensive involving approximately 250 fighters targeting 3 American FOBs. The command post you destroyed was coordinating the operation. Your kills eliminated their leadership structure. The intelligence you gathered gave us complete picture of their force disposition, timing, and tactics. He set the folder on her bed. Conservative estimate, you saved 300 American lives, possibly more. Rachel stared at the reports. Numbers and statistics that represented breathing soldiers who didn't die because she'd refused to. What about Garrett? He's been relieved of field command, not punitive. He requested it. Says he needs to rethink his approach to intelligence evaluation. He wants to see you when you're ready. I don't know if I'm ready. That's fair. Take your time. Brennan pulled out another document. This is the official after-action summary. Might want to read it. Rachel opened the file. The language was dry, military bureaucracy, but the content made her breath catch. Sergeant Rachel Hartwell conducted sustained solo sniper operations behind enemy lines for 6 days while critically wounded. 17 confirmed enemy KIA. Enemy command post destroyed. Strategic intelligence gathered preventing larger offensive. Subject demonstrated exceptional tactical acumen, survival skills, and combat effectiveness under extreme duress. Recommend for Silver Star. Possible upgrade to Medal of Honor pending further review. I don't need medals, Rachel said quietly. No, you don't, but you're getting them anyway. Not for you. For every other soldier who'll see what you did and understand that being right matters more than being popular. That trusting your analysis matters more than following certainty. That one person who sees the truth can change everything. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had haunted her since that snow-covered ridge. Did he apologize? Garrett? He wants to, in person. But Rachel, I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me 40 years ago when I failed your father. Brennan leaned forward. You don't need his apology. You don't need his validation. You don't need anything from him. What you did speaks louder than any words he could offer. You were right. You proved it. You survived it. That's your victory. Whether he acknowledges it or not doesn't change the truth. But I want him to know. Want them all to know. They do. Entire base knows. Entire command structure knows. Your satellite analysis is being taught at every military intelligence course. Your survival tactics are being incorporated into SEER training. Your case study is required reading for officers learning about terrain analysis. Brennan smiled. You changed how this army fights. That's bigger than apology. That's legacy. 2 weeks later, Rachel was mobile, walking with assistance, breathing without pain, strength returning slowly. The doctors cleared her for visitors beyond Brennan. Sullivan came first, brought flowers, looked uncomfortable holding them. Never bought flowers before, he admitted. Wasn't sure what kind warriors like. Rachel laughed. First real laugh in 3 weeks. Any kind means you tried. They talked about the mission, about the 6 days. Sullivan filled in gaps from the American side. How Brennan had tracked her through enemy radio intercepts. How he'd fought to organize rescue operations. How he'd prepared extraction teams daily waiting for opportunity. We never gave up on you, Sullivan said. Brennan wouldn't let us. He knew you were alive, knew you were fighting, knew you'd prove everyone wrong. I had good teachers. You had good blood. The rest you did yourself. Sullivan pulled out a small box. This is from the guys. Everyone who was on that mission. Everyone who came back. Inside was a patch, custom made, not official Army issue. Black background, silver sniper scope crosshairs, text that said Ghost of Pale Ridge above and Sierra 2 below. "We're calling ourselves the Ghost Company now," Sullivan explained, "because we're the unit that had a ghost watching over us even when we didn't deserve it. Even when we left her behind, she still saved us." Rachel held the patch, felt the weight of brothers who'd failed her and then honored her. Complex emotions, anger and forgiveness mixing. "Tell them I accept it," she said. "Tell them we all make mistakes in chaos. What matters is learning from them." Sullivan nodded, then his expression shifted. Serious. "Garrett wants to see you. Asked me to ask if you're willing." Rachel considered. Part of her wanted to refuse, make him carry the weight of leaving her. But she remembered Brennan's words. She didn't need anything from Garrett. She'd already won. "Send him in." Captain Michael Garrett entered the hospital room looking like a man carrying the world. He stood at attention, formal. "Sergeant Hartwell." "Captain." "Permission to speak freely?" "Granted." Garrett took a breath, started the speech he'd clearly rehearsed. "I failed you. In every way an officer can fail a soldier. I dismissed your analysis when it was perfect. I ignored your warnings when they were prophetic. I left you behind when I should have confirmed, and I marked you dead when I should have verified." He met her eyes. "There's no apology sufficient for that, no words that undo what happened. But I need you to know I was wrong about everything, and you were right about everything." Rachel let the silence stretch, made him sit with it. Then she spoke. "Sir, do you know why my father died?" Garrett shook his head. "He died because his commanding officer ignored his terrain analysis, walked a patrol into an ambush he'd predicted. 3 soldiers killed, my father among them, 15 years ago." She held Garrett's gaze. "You did the same thing, different war, same mistake, 3 soldiers dead, and you almost made it 4. Garrett's face went pale. "I didn't know about your father." "Doesn't matter if you knew. Pattern's the same. Officer trusts certainty over analysis. Soldier who reads ground correctly gets ignored. People die. History repeats. How do I prevent it from repeating again?" And there it was, the question that mattered. Rachel could destroy him with words, could demand his resignation, could make him carry this guilt forever. Or she could do what her father would have wanted, turn failure into lesson. "You prevent it by remembering this moment," Rachel said, "by teaching other officers what you learned, by ensuring that next time someone sees what I saw, command evaluates it fully, not based on rank, not based on gender, not based on how certain you feel, based on evidence and analysis." She leaned forward despite the pain it caused. "You prevent it by making my sacrifice mean something, by changing doctrine so the next Rachel Hartwell gets heard before people die." Garrett nodded slowly. "I've already begun. New protocols for field intelligence evaluation. Mandatory review of terrain analysis from qualified personnel regardless of rank. Your satellite methodology being taught as case study." He pulled out a document. "And I've recommended you for permanent tactical advisor role. When you're recovered, help train officers in what to look for, what to listen for, how to distinguish good analysis from noise." Rachel took the document, read it. Comprehensive proposal. Not just words, actual systematic change. "I'll consider it. That's all I ask." Garrett moved toward the door, stopped, turned back. "For what it's worth, Sergeant, what you did out there is the most extraordinary military action I've witnessed in 20 years. 17 kills while wounded. Command post destroyed. Offensive prevented. 6 days of impossible survival." He shook his head. "You didn't just prove you were right. You proved you're the finest soldier I've ever had the honor of failing." After he left, Rachel sat with the proposal and thought about futures. She could return to regular duty, just another sniper. Let the story fade into legend and classification. Or she could do what Brennan had done, Turn experience into teaching. Ensure the next generation learn from her mistakes and victories. Become the voice that made officers listen. The choice felt obvious. 6 months later, Rachel Hartwell stood in front of an advanced military intelligence course at Fort Benning. 70 officers, mixed rank, all there to learn terrain analysis and tactical assessment. Colonel James Brennan sat in the back row. Observer, mentor, the man who'd carried guilt for 15 years and found redemption watching his protege succeed. Rachel began without preamble. No introduction needed. Her story had preceded her. "Show of hands," she said. "How many of you know the story of Pale Ridge?" Every hand went up. "Good. Now I'm going to tell you what the story doesn't include, the parts that matter more than legend." She pulled up the satellite imagery, the analysis she'd done, the marks showing predicted ambush positions. "I was right about this. Perfect analysis, correct in every detail. But I was also a sergeant, young, female, presenting findings that contradicted official intelligence." She looked at the officers. "How many of you would have listened to me?" Silence, uncomfortable, honest. That's the lesson. Not that I survived, not that I proved them wrong. The lesson is that truth doesn't care about rank or gender or how certain you feel. The ground tells you what's real. Your job is to read it correctly and have the courage to trust what you see, even when everyone else says you're wrong. For the next 2 hours, she walked them through the analysis. What to look for, how to distinguish prepared positions from natural terrain, how to recognize patterns, how to build cases strong enough that command couldn't dismiss them. Brennan added commentary from his 40 years, Gulf War examples, Cold War lessons, the accumulated wisdom of generations translated into doctrine. At the end, a young captain raised his hand. "Sergeant Hartwell, how did you survive 6 days wounded behind enemy lines?" Rachel smiled. "I survived because I refused to accept death as inevitable. Because 3 generations of warriors taught me that being too stubborn to quit beats being smart enough to know when you're beaten." She paused. "But mostly I survived because I was angry. Cold, focused, methodical anger at being dismissed, at being left, at being written off. I turned that anger into 17 enemy casualties and saved 300 American lives. That's what happens when you underestimate someone who knows they're right." The class ended. Officers filed out. Several stopped to thank her, to ask questions, to shake her hand and call her sergeant with respect that had been earned through blood and vindication. When the room cleared, Brennan approached. "Your father would be so proud. I think about him every day, wonder what he'd say about all this. He'd say you finished what he started. Proved that Hartwell analysis beats official certainty every time. Change the system so others don't die the way he did." Brennan smiled. "And he'd say you became better than him, better than me, the warrior we both hoped you'd be." Rachel looked at the empty classroom, at the satellite imagery still displayed, at the path she'd walked from dismissed sergeant to decorated instructor. Did it matter, Colonel? All of it? The 6 days, the kills, the survival. Did it change anything? Brennan gestured to the door. 70 officers just learned to listen to their soldiers, to trust analysis over certainty, to evaluate intelligence based on evidence instead of rank. Your story will teach thousands more. Doctrine changed, training changed, culture changing. He met her eyes. "Yeah, Rachel, it mattered. You mattered. And you'll keep mattering for as long as this army teaches people to read ground correctly." That evening, Rachel sat in her quarters and cleaned her father's rifle, the M40A5 that had carried him through wars and carried her through hell. Beside it lay the medals, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Combat Action Badge, but also the unofficial patch from Ghost Company and the P-38 can opener that had belonged to 3 generations. A knock at the door. "Come in." Colonel Brennan entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a worn folder. "Thought you might want company." Rachel smiled. always. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind earned through shared understanding of what war cost and what it proved. Brennan opened the folder. Inside, photographs. Young soldiers in classrooms, taking notes, studying terrain maps with the intensity of people who understood mistakes killed. Fort Benning yesterday, Brennan said. 217 students this quarter, all learning the Hartwell method, all understanding that the ground doesn't lie. Rachel studied the photos, saw herself in their focus, saw her father in their determination. He'd be proud, Brennan said quietly. Jack would see what you've built and know his death wasn't wasted, that the pattern broke, that the next generation listens. What about you, Colonel? Are you proud? Brennan's eyes went distant, seeing ghosts of his own, missions, failures, the weight of 40 years. I spent 15 years carrying guilt for your father, thinking I should have fought harder, pushed back stronger, refused the order. He looked at Rachel. Then I watched you survive what killed him, watched you prove what he never got to prove, watched you change a system he died trying to fix. His voice roughened. Yeah, Rachel, I'm proud, more than I can say. Rachel's phone buzzed. Video call from her mother. Answer it, Brennan said. I'll wait. Her mother's face filled the screen. Background noise of a gathering. Voices. Laughter. Rachel, we're at the memorial dedication. Wish you could be here. The camera panned. Small park in Rachel's hometown. Stone monument. 3 names carved in granite. Sergeant William Hartwell. Grenada, 1983. The ground never lies. Lieutenant Commander Jack Hartwell, Afghanistan, 2011. Trust the terrain. Sergeant Rachel Hartwell, Pale Ridge, 2025. Prove them wrong. Below the names an inscription. 3 generations who saw what others missed. 3 warriors who trusted ground over orders. Their legacy. Listen to those who read the battlefield true. Their sacrifice, the price of certainty over truth. Their victory changed how America fights. Finally, Brennan spoke. Mission complete, Sergeant? Rachel looked at the P-38 opener. 3 generations of warriors who carried it. 3 wars it had survived. 3 lessons it represented. Mission complete, Colonel. What's next? Tomorrow I teach another class. Next week, another base. Next year, another generation who listen before the bullets fly. She met his eyes. That's the real mission. Not the survival, not the vindication, making sure the pattern ends with me, that the next sergeant who sees danger gets heard, that the next father comes home. Brennan raised his coffee cup. To the Hartwells, all 3, the warriors who prove the ground doesn't lie. Rachel touched her cup to his. And to the soldiers who learned to listen. Later that night, Rachel walked to the ranges, empty now, quiet, stars bright overhead. She set up at the 800-meter line, her father's rifle, the scope he'd built, the weapon that had saved her life and taken 17 others. One shot, into darkness, the way her grandfather had taught her father, the way her father had taught her, the ritual of warriors acknowledging ghosts and honoring ground. The round flew true, disappeared into night. Somewhere downrange, it found earth. Another mark in the soil, another proof that the Hartwell eye never missed what mattered. Rachel whispered to the darkness, to her father, to her grandfather, to every soldier who died being right. I proved it, changed it, made sure it matters. That's all any of us can do. Be right, survive being right, and teach others to trust when they know. The wind carried her words away, but the truth remained, carved into doctrine, written into training, built into the memorial stone that bore 3 names and one unbreakable legacy. The ground never lies. The Hartwells proved it across 3 generations and 3 wars. And finally, America learned to listen. Rachel Hartwell turned and walked back toward the lights of the base. Tomorrow she'd teach again. The day after. The year after. For as long as it took to ensure no other soldier died, because command wouldn't listen to someone who could read the ground correctly. The ghost had walked home, had proven everyone wrong, had survived impossible odds and transformed tragedy into triumph. Now she'd make sure the lessons lived forever. Her father had died being right. She'd lived being right. And she'd made sure the difference between those 2 outcomes became smaller for everyone who came after. Mission complete. The ground never lies. The Hartwells proved it. And the Army finally understood.